Hello. We're going to start in 1 minute. Thank you for being here. I'm Charlotte from the FSCC. Welcome. Welcome to all for that new webinar, how to attract and retain top talent. We are very pleased to have 3 great speakers this morning. We have Orani Johnson from SLB. Very happy that also Orani joined the board of the FSCC. Orani has a top executive position at SLB, and we really are very happy to have her as a speaker this morning. And then we have Zoe from KPMG. Also, KPMG has been a very loyal member of the FSCC, and we are very concerned about the future of work. So that's why we are doing that webinar today. And Zoe will be a speaker, but also the moderator this morning. And we have Lionel from Famoco. He's a brilliant CEO and entrepreneur. And now he just recently moved in Texas. So that's why we have him this morning explaining his vision as a startup, how to retain the talent and how to find between France and the US, what's the difference to retain the talent. So for the time being, I'm done. So I will open the discussion with Zoe, who's going to start. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you. Good morning. Unfortunately, my high school French has not stayed with me as much, so my accent isn't nearly as beautiful as our other speakers, so please, apologies in advance. But I will be sharing some information, some high-level information about what we are seeing with the job market in the US and then in Texas specifically, and then also talk a little bit about the results of a survey that we did with the American Worker to talk about what sort of topics are on the top of mind for employees, what's important to them, and what does that mean for you and your company, how you can go about attracting talent and retaining talent. So I will share my screen. I cannot see it, so can I get a verbal confirmation that you can see my slides, please?
Yes, it's good.
Okay,
thank you.
Wonderful. So national trends. This information is from, we have a chief economist at KPMG, Diane Swank, and she provides monthly economic updates. This is from her update on Friday. So the bottom line is that employment remains remarkably strong in November, and wages are accelerating instead of decelerating. So payroll employment rose by 263,000, driven primarily by strong gains in leisure and hospitality in the healthcare industry. Staffing needs in healthcare remain strong, not a big surprise coming out of the pandemic. The next largest gain came from hiring at the state and local levels, primarily in education. Retail employment fell, manufacturing employment added a few jobs, but much slower than the previous month. So overall, and this is where it gets interesting, unemployment rate held steady at 3.7%. So the participation in the labor market right now is at 62.1, which is a slight decline, but still very high. The drop in participation was due primarily to loss of women, and we've talked. You can see in a lot of media is covering how many women left the workforce because of COVID. Some have come back, but not all of them, and Hispanic and white men. So the number of unemployed is about the same at about 6 million for the month. So what's interesting is that there are still, on average, 1.7 job openings per job seeker at the end of October. So it's still very much a person's market. Companies are still looking for employees. There's still a lot of work out there. The Federal Reserve is hoping to get that to more of a one-on-one versus the 1.7. And then what's also, I think, interesting is the sick and unable to work, almost 70% above the monthly level that we saw in pre-pandemic. So you have great demand for employees, and you continue to see a real shortage. And that is leading to the pressures that many of you are probably feeling right now. Texas trends. And this information is from an article that was in the Houston Chronicle that KPMG contributed to last month. So what's interesting in Texas is, and no surprise, the local economy continues to outpace the national economy, especially as you see more technology companies moving to Texas. So here are some fun facts and figures. In a nutshell, very strong. The recovery, job recovery that we've seen in Texas is primarily split between low wage, frontline, and salaries. So hospitality continued to struggle. You had 40% of hospitality workers left during COVID, and companies are still trying to get them back. The Texas economy grew by 1.8% in the second quarter from a year earlier, which is the strongest growth rate among all of the states in the US. So it really shows that Texas continues to be very strong from a job market perspective. The Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas boosted its forecast to 4.4% from a previous forecast of 4.2. And then the September private industry compensation rose in Houston 5.4% over last year. So very, very strong. What's also interesting here is, I've got the number up there 2 times, you see across the US a big difference in companies asking employees to return to the office. And we see in energy, which is obviously a very strong industry here in Texas, that energy companies are 2 times more likely than other sectors to require a 5-day office schedule. And this is really interesting, and I'll get to this in just a second, because you see the hybrid workforce, the where are people working, as a big consideration for employees. So as we see strong economy, very competitive, not as many employees, so companies are having to think about compensation, but also think outside of compensation. How are they being competitive with their pay, for sure, and bonuses, but also flexibility and benefits and other things that they can provide to their employee base. So specifically, so I mentioned we did a survey. KPMG every year does a survey with the American worker, and we saw some interesting themes. So a couple of them. Remote work is important. It's not a panacea. The hybrid is not going to be the answer to everything, but you see an interesting disparity. You've got about 26% of managers want to work mostly remote, and you've got 24% of younger employees who want to work mostly in the office. So you have this interesting balance between people that want to work in the office, those that don't, and companies are faced with that conundrum of, how do I figure out what makes sense and what's going to be attractive for employees. The great consideration, what we found is, by and large, people feel the stresses of their jobs have gotten much worse. But they're more stressed at work, they're not as happy at work, and those that are not as happy are, no surprise, looking at moving on to something else. And then balance and benefits. We find, again, you're never going to dismiss compensation, but that when asked, the American workers say, I'm interested in being paid, I'm interested in being paid fairly. However, I'm also interested in PTO. I'm interested in sick leave. I want to know that I have work-life balance. I want benefits that I can use to care for my family, to achieve greater balance at home. You saw within the pandemic a big shifting of benefits, of companies saying, what else is important? What are people taking advantage of? And we saw that changing quite a bit. And then also resources that would help me manage my well-being. And then also, and these are not necessarily surprising, these are just the hallmarks of a good business, but we continue to see American workers say, I need to know my career path. And only about half of American workers feel like they know where their career is going, and they feel like they've got opportunities to progress. Connections matter. When we ask, we say, do you have sponsorship? Do you feel like you have somebody who's looking out for you at your company? And we find that the numbers are pretty high, that people don't always feel like they have the connections that they need, or they have an opportunity to raise concerns. And then finally, impact. We specifically talked about ESG in our survey, but whether you consider it ESG or aspects of community impact, we're finding that employees want to know they work for companies that care about their communities. If you look at the numbers, we want impact. 72% said yes, having an employer that cares about environmental, social governance is important. I may feel like I've benefited from DEI, but it's important to me that my company does have a perspective on that. And then finally, aligning to the vision of my company is important for me to have job satisfaction at home. So those are some of the big trends that we are seeing, and those are relevant to employers as they figure out, how do I attract talent by looking at what's important to talent, and then how do I retain talent once they're there by taking care of those things that they prioritize. So that's the big picture, high level, still strong, strong job market, still looking for people, and companies are finding they have to change the message in order to resonate with those they're trying to attract. And with that, I will turn it over to our friends at SLB. Sorry, not Schlumberger. I know you've changed your name. I apologize, to SLB, and would like to hear the perspective of what you've seen at your organization.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon for those in France, maybe. I'm very happy to be with you today. I represent indeed the Chamber of Commerce, but also SLB. As just stated by Zoe, we have just changed our brand, slightly evolved from the past. So whoever's on this call, mostly you have known us under the name of Schlumberger. So slight evolution in our naming, and I'll first start with a bit of a spill, I'd say, around why we went for this transition. So all in all, as a summary, the idea was that we are at a critical juncture for the company and for the industry. Critical juncture as well in the employment market, as you can imagine. For us at SLB, it was the opportunity for us to redefine who we are, setting the stage for an evolved culture so that we could better retain our people, focusing on connections that matter, but also a purpose. We want impact. That's what we heard from our people as well. So just as we were reflecting on this evolution of our culture, we wanted to highlight that we always had a commitment to address the most difficult challenges in our industry. We were a startup company at the very first stages, more than 96 years of existence now, and we have become this big global company today. But we started with a commitment to address the most difficult challenges in our industry, and we want to continue to push the limits of innovation further. We want to maintain that legacy of leadership and growth, and we need to transform for that, evolve, and go further. So we unveiled last month our new identity, SLB. It represents our role as what we very clearly articulate as a global technology company. We are focused on driving energy innovation for a balanced planet. These words are very important, as they should resonate for any one of our employees today, but also for talents that we continue to want to attract to this energy landscape. It is a true differentiator for the industry. And for those who have noticed, it was on the cover page of this invitation. Our logo shows a new curve. That curve is one that translates boldness through our bright color, and a new identity that symbolizes our commitment to moving farther, faster, and facilitating the world's energy needs today and obviously tomorrow. So just a few words first before I move on to our a few data points. My passion today, I represent the HR function in SLB, is attracting more and more people to the energy industry, energy at large, from the traditional core energy services and energy technologies to moving the needle and shifting towards renewable energies. We are companies that we will drive that shift for a sustainable future. Today, we have 98,000 employees, so far a different landscape to a startup company today, but 98,000 employees, and it continues to grow. Our presence today is in 120 countries. We have 170 nationalities year to date. We also recruited in more than 83 different countries and from 135 nationalities. So just this year, up to today, we just looked at the numbers. We've recruited a little bit more than 18,000 people in 2022. So this was exactly to capture and deliver on our current upcycle. You've seen the numbers with Zoe. We are in a growth market at the moment, and we believe in SLB at least that this growth will continue. A very slight drop in 2023. So we believe we will continue to recruit at a similar pace in 2023. And that is in all our segments, all areas of activity in SLB. That means technology, digital, but also our core services, trying and pushing the boundaries around decarbonizing our industry. In the US, just as a point of reference, we hired, out of those 18,000, we hired 3,400 people as of today, mainly obviously in Texas. In France, for those hearing us today from France, we hired more than 400 employees as well. France continues to be a country where we invest on technology development. We have new energies such as geo-energy investments, but also hydrogen partnerships and developments, so that we feed the market with the best technologies in the years to come. So that's on the talent acquisition side. How do we make sure that once our people join us, they continue to be nurtured in such a way that they drive the innovation and the next steps of our energy industry? On the growth mindset side, we have invested and we continue to invest in training across the board. We had 20,000 learners over 2022 so far, and our training investments are expected to grow by 23% in 2023. This is to make sure we continue to invest in upskilling our people once they join us, and this is throughout the career. So roughly, obviously, we have training centers across the world. We want to continue to build partnerships as well with the governments, institutions, peer companies as well, because we believe that in this transition of the energy landscape, we need to partner together to make it work. It will no longer only rely on one company in isolation, but all partners bringing our strengths together. How do we attract to our industry? I've just spoken about culture and the values that we showcase every day. And that's a recommendation and a reminder as well to those who are considered as startups today. We started as a startup. The brothers, the Schlumberger brothers at the time had made sure they defined very clearly the values that that they had, even when there were 5 employees. And defining that as a starting point will allow you to evolve and scale as you go and as the society also evolves around you. So really an important anchor that you should have at the very start of defining what you provide to the industry. And just to echo a few words said by Zoe, it was a challenge this year. It was forecasted to be the worst time for SLB in retaining our workforce. We've achieved by the end of the year a much lower attrition rate than any other peer, whether in the technology landscape, Google, Amazon, Tesla, or in the traditional peer industry, oil and gas, our competitors, but also the service company, the operators that we work with. So our attrition rate is one of the lowest in the industry. How did we achieve that? I think, again, culture and values, we're recognized and we look at data every day. We see that our culture and value and inclusiveness is one that people value and one that continues to attract people to our industry and to SLB. We went for hybrid working conditions. Indeed, Zoe just pointed it out, important factor to put forward in your offerings to attract new talents. So hybrid working conditions are in place across the globe for us, and continue definitely to attract our people to join us. Benefits updates, we just launched new days off in the US. This competition of talents also pushes the boundaries of progress in our working conditions, and we should actually welcome those progressive measures. Time off, I just said. Well-being obviously is an important element, and post-COVID has shown us how important it was to embed it in all our policies and practices. And the last thing I wanted to make sure I highlighted, gender balance. We are at a turning point, making sure that we create the just conditions, inclusive conditions to creating the future of our industry requires that we get to a greater balance. We are at the highest rates in the industry when it comes to gender balance, but far away from what we want to achieve. We are 23% salaried female in our workforce, all in, but we want to reach 25% by 2025, and obviously push those boundaries to 30% by 2030. Far from an ambitious 50%, but we will get there. And I'll be open for questions on the matter beyond that. So this is what I wanted to say. I think a word from Zoe. Oh, sorry, Zoe.
Oh, no, it sounds so much better with your accent, so you can really say however you'd like. Thank you. That was really helpful. That was interesting to see the evolution, especially because SLB is such a market leader, not just in oil and gas, but in technology. That where SLB goes, others will follow. So what I'd like to do is switch over to Lionel, and then when he is finished, we'll have some questions for both of you, if that's okay, because I think a lot of what he's going to talk about will be a nice a nice balance to what you just described. So Lionel, why don't we switch over to you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for a nice presentation. So my name is Lionel Baraban. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Famoco. I'm very pleased to be here with you and try to talk a little bit about how do we handle, attract, manage talents. So just a few words about Famoco. At Famoco, what we're trying to do is we provide a safe and ethical mobile solution for transactional application, and specifically in payment and identity. So we provide network of acceptance for mobile devices in order to check identities or to make any type of transactions, including payment, access control, healthcare, transit industry. Each time you need to have an exchange of data with traceability and security. And really our game is to try to provide simplicity to security and ethics to data. So that's what Famoco does. We are a little bit more than 100 people company. We are headquartered in Paris. And we have offices in Africa, in Abidjan and Accra. We're opening now one in Tanzania. We have several offices in France. Just opened an office here in Texas, Houston. We have an office in China, in Shenzhen, and we have a small office in India. So the first question is, when you're a startup, is how do you try to compete with like the big players like SLB, but also, you know, how do you attract a talent where someone has an offer from Facebook or Google or whomever? So how do you compete? How do you create an employer brand? And I think that today, at least the employee that we want to attract and the talent that we want to attract are employees or collaborators that are fully involved in the company's value that we are trying to push forward. And the company values need to have something to do with there are a few names for it. So SDG, the Sustainable Development Goal, CSR, ESG. I mean, there are a lot of different names to basically say the same thing, is what is the impact you have on the society. And when you are a startup and you create a startup around the idea of reshaping the way people interact with technology, and it is key to have talents that are really, it's part of their daily mission, it's part of their passion to try to make it a reality. So for Famoco, we have one leg in Africa and one leg in North America, the brain in Europe, and in our days, I think it makes a lot of sense for our employees to understand that when you are in a startup, you need to think globally, even if you're small. So the challenges, and just before the challenges, everyone talks a lot about a startup and what is the difference between you know, HR in a startup or in a big corporation. But let's try to give a definition of a startup first. So for me, a startup is a company that knows that the company we are building today will be dramatically different from the one we will have in 1 year from now. And the one I have today is very different from the one I had a year ago. So that constant metamorphosis is really built in our DNA. And in order to work in those conditions, you need to attract some specific candidates. they all not everyone is built for such a drastic constant changes. So now, what are the challenges? So the first challenge is, I would say, make sure that we convey properly the value and we create a corporate culture, even if we are spread Africa, Europe, China, India, US, how you create one corporate culture. And that is one of the first challenge when we start to open a company in Accra, or we start to open an office in Dar es Salaam. It's very difficult to make sure that the corporate culture in Dar es Salaam, in Abidjan, Paris, or New Delhi is exactly the same. The second challenge is to make sure that everyone is fully committed at the same level. And at FAMOCO, we had the opportunity a few years ago to start working with WFP, the World Food Program, for whom we do all their cash-based transfer. And I must say that at the beginning, it was just a deal that we did with an NGO. But over the years, it changed completely the way it changed the DNA of the company. It changed the DNA of the company because when you have people starting to really see that their day-to-day work has a real impact on how people get food in more than 40 countries, and we're dealing with over 50 million beneficiaries all over the world. I think that their responsibility that they feel in their day-to-day work change completely their relation to the company. As a startup, we cannot compete against Facebook or Google. So now they're laying off, so it's a little bit easier, but we cannot compete with money. We are not the richest in the place. I mean, when you hire a CTO and they just double their salary, I mean, we cannot compete. We are not as rich as they are. So you need to compete with something else. And for FAMOCO, the competition is how do we want to really reshape our link to technology, how we create an ethical mobile infrastructure, how we provide a simple way to have access to security, how you make sure that the technology that you sell, the technology that you provide really impact the day-to-day life of people. In a simple word, how each one of our employees can go back at home and explain in 2 words what they do and why they are proud of doing what they do. As a startup, this is the only way we can compete against the GAFAs. That's what I wanted to quickly say as an opening, and of course, open to discussion and to comments and questions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you both. So again, we will have a few questions with both of our presenters, but if you have anything you would like to ask, please put it in the chat and we will see that and then address those questions as we are able. So a couple questions for both of you. And what was interesting is you both talked about the global nature of your business, obviously to different scales, but you're both truly international companies. And Lionel, you talked about some of the challenges of creating a consistent culture across the globe. I'm curious to hear about some of the solutions. So if both of you could address a little bit, what are some of those things that you have done or that you have seen that have been effective, or even what has not been effective in trying to create a consistent culture when you have the challenge of a global workforce?
Please.
Are you giving me the priority, Lionel?
Yes, because I'm French.
Thank you. So I'd say it was back to my comment around, as you start, put in place the foundations that are scalable right away. I don't think we invented much since it all started in Schlumberger at the time. We evolved for sure, but the foundations of a culture and a purpose were already set at that time, and it scaled throughout the years. One of the most important elements that is still recognized today was the value we give to the diversity of our workforce. So when it was first created, the idea was you start a company, but the value you take is from the local value you create in the markets you want to get into. So from a workforce standpoint, I would say, is valuing the in-country value you have by developing local talent that will then be in capacity to grow and scale your business locally. And how did we do that? We always had a complete syncing of where do we generate revenue? The amount of revenue we generated has to match the amount of people we recruit from those markets. Once they're with us, we tried to expose our talents outside with the decision makers, with those that were the thought leaders of the company, to then put them back in the markets we want to develop further. So we continue now to do that, but at a company size that is 100,000 people, and we're now at 23 billion in terms of revenue. But it started the same way as it looks today in a way. So giving those foundations, giving that foundation of what culture we want to nurture, what mindset we want to drive within the company was a very important foundation to that scalable size.
It's interesting because what I hear you saying is you haven't forgotten your roots. Many of the elements that were put in place when SLB was beginning at Schlumberger have stayed fairly consistent, but obviously much more scalable since you've become the company that you are. So Lionel, what about you? How do you address the concerns or challenges of a global workforce, yet keeping a consistent culture, which you have both said is so critical to your success?
So the first thing is we have strong company values, and we keep on repeating them and trying to illustrate them on a daily basis. So it's very important that everyone knows what our company values are, and we need to illustrate them all the time. It's not just one time you just publish the company values and then it's done. So it needs to be, you need to live by them and to live with the company values on a daily basis. The second thing, and just going to share something interesting, we're trying to do once a year a corporate event where we invite everyone. So we are 100, we're 130 on the last corporate event. So we take everyone, including the interns, absolutely everyone. Of course, not everyone can make it, but we invite everyone. And we try to do something interesting, something challenging. So one year we climbed the Mont Blanc. The other year we went a few weeks ago. We went to Marrakesh with the entire team to camp in the desert. So I think that those corporate events are key to have the people not only on Zoom but touching each other, playing with each other, interacting, having fun together. So it's key. But I want to say, for the first year, I had a comment saying, you know, Lionel, you're flying people from China, from India, from Africa to Morocco. What about climate change? Is it really something worth it? So we start to see even here some valid questions. So of course we came up with answer. We said, you know, we're gonna compensate the carbon debt that we created and so on. But we can see that even in that we start to have some questions. So company value, corporate event, we have daily meetings, and I think they are very important. So every day, every team is meeting, no matter where they are in the world. Once every 2 weeks, we have an all-hand meeting where the entire company for an hour, we are all together for 1 hour, and we have one of our team members. So there is a like more formal corporate presentation for from the top management of the company. And for half an hour, there is one people in the company just presenting what they do on a daily basis and what are the innovation and what they want to propose to the entire company. And I would say that the last thing is transparency. I think that it is key element of having everyone close to everyone together. So we make sure that everything is transparent. The budgets, the turnover, everything is fully transparent. So those are all the tools that we're trying to put together in order to create that global corporate culture.
Thank you. That was some very helpful, very tactical recommendations. So we're getting some questions in from our audience. The first one is from Jill, and this is continuing on the theme of globalization. Are you finding there are specific differences in recruiting and retaining talent for different cultures or different countries within your organization? So if you could talk a little bit about that. Do you find differences by regions? Do you address those differences? What's your perspective? Who wants to take this one first?
Lionel, do you want to start?
Okay,
Your
I'll
turn
start
now.
on this one. Yeah,
Your
okay,
turn.
I'll start on this one. You know, I hate those differences. I don't want to hear about those differences. I know they exist, but as a principle, I don't want to say, no, in China, they're more like that, you know, but in Africa, they have more time. And I mean, for me, there is always in the back of my mind, something that I really dislike about those cultural differences. So it is something that we specifically not take into consideration. I don't want to hear that an employee in Africa is fundamentally different than an employee in Paris or an employee in the US. Now, where there are some cultural difference is the way you address the salary, the way you address the compensation, the way you address. So there are some legal differences that are also connected to some cultural differences, of course, but in terms of what is the package, what is the interview process, how we attract talents. I mean, an employee is an employee, no matter where they are.
Okay, thank you for that perspective. So, Arani, what's Sylvie's perspective on this?
I was reflecting on a comparison, and it's, you know, probably people in SLB would say, why are you comparing our company to that one? But I just want to share an experience. Is the experience that anyone has gone through in this call most probably is you've been to France, in the suburbs of France, going to IKEA to get your next, you know, furniture piece. You've gone to Houston to IKEA, and once you enter that IKEA in Houston or the IKEA in New Delhi in India, you will be able to just shut yourself off from the actual external environment and feel you're exactly in the same place. You can feel in New Delhi exactly the same way as you feel when you're in Paris. The actual route is the same. The products they sell are the same. The actual culture they try to symbolize in the different parts of the shop and the design are exactly the same. So it's, for me, it's a bit like that, creating the same experience for our people, the same experience of the brand or the company belonging in any country you operate in, because you've created the same, obviously, cultural anchor, the same behaviors that you expect from people, and policies, guidelines have to be consistent. Now, compliance will dictate differences, but the values you put through in those guidelines or practices are exactly the same. The only thing you do that is different is you respect and empathize with the different cultural belongings, the education people have, the religion maybe that they have, or the religious beliefs or conservatisms, for instance, in some countries. You need to respect those elements of cultural diversity while creating a safe space within the boundaries of the company that are the same and shared across borders. I hope that was clear, but yeah, I would be using the same words as Lionel here.
Well, that's very interesting. And that, I think, points to the challenges of a lot of companies right now. How do you provide a consistent experience while respecting diversity of employees and diversity of cultures? And I think you both did an excellent job just talking about some of those ways that we do that. And I know one thing that we have found with our global workforce, and this is going to sound so simple, but, and you, Lionel, you touched on this, getting to know each other. It is very difficult to otherize a group once you know them. So giving employees the experience to come together, both virtually and in person, to have a common experience and a common cultural language is really important. So I want to talk a little bit about, for SLB, you talked about the evolution. And I'm curious, given we know that the workforce, the experience has changed. We have been through this incredible global experience that we are going to be forever marked. And we talk a lot about some of the generational differences. Are you seeing a change in employees? Are employees asking for different things? Are you looking at different requirements, different priorities? How has your SLB employee changed or evolved over the last few years or potentially longer? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. Yes, there are changes within our workforce. For sure, I'd say that the COVID, the pandemic, has really shifted the priorities of our people. The call for more flexibility, the call for more support beyond just the individual, but also the families. And sometimes as well, as a reaction to that phase, has been around not as open as in the past to sacrificing a whole, a family and a whole, I'd say, living conditions to go without boundaries everywhere in the world. We used to be having a workforce that was extremely open to agile, adventurous, wanting to go out there without any planning involved. We have to shift. SLB has one element where we need to continue to evolve, is around the respect for family, the respect for work-life balance. This is something something that we are obviously analyzing in all our data elements, those who leave, but also those who read about us. The feedback is we need to evolve on respect for personal life. As such, actually, we've taken a learning from it. And as we redefined our brand, we created a new or evolved culture framework. And as part of that culture framework, we asked ourselves, okay, is this a turning point to push for change in our internal behaviors? So we identified what were our aspirational behaviors in the company, so that we reach at the end the expectations of our people and the new talents joining us.
We're getting lots of questions from the audience, so I will actually go to those if that's okay. Lionel, unless there's something specifically about this that you wanted to address. If not, I'll
No, I fully agree.
So we've got some good questions. So one thing, John asked this a little while ago, I want to address his question about remote work. So in addition to employees changing, obviously our environments have changed. Hybrid work used to be a 980, was about as pioneering as companies got, and you could take every other Friday off, and that was about it. Now, obviously, hybrid work has changed dramatically. So curious how your companies have embraced this, what some of the challenges are. How do you see this evolving, and how has this either been helpful or a hindrance to your organizations? Lionel, do you want to go first?
Yes. So it's yes, it's a big change in our organization. I'm used to be a big fan of having all the people together in the same place, because I believe that, you know, nonverbal communication is as important as the very formal and verbal communication. And we've tried everything from Zoom Cafe to Zoom chat to whatever. It doesn't work. The reality is the only thing that works is having people in the same room and chit-chatting together and creating a nonverbal link, and there is no replacement for that. So now we tried a lot of things, and in some of the recruitment I do, this is, and specifically in the younger generation, this is one of the first questions I have is, what is your remote work policy? So generally, when I'm a recruiter, it's not a good sign. I don't like that question to be asked as one of the first questions. But we need to face that reality. It is the world we are living in today, and I can just say that for Famoco, what we do is we provide some flexibility. So we say you can take, so depends on the different units, but between 30 to 40% of your time as a remote work, and you can organize that the way you want. So we try to be as flexible as possible. In some other, the IT people, sometimes it's easier for them to work remotely, and I must say that their level of efficiency increased with them, you know, working from home. They're more focused on their job, and they like it. But we have one day per week where they all need to be together in the office. So I think we try to have, you know, one big corporate policy and say, you know, everyone does the same, and then we try to do one per team, one per region. I think the only word is flexibility. We need to hear what they need, and we need to be flexible. And it's a metamorphosis that we are in, and it's just the beginning, and we are inside that change. So we need to embrace it and to see where it goes. I don't know.
Arini, what do you think? How is this working with SLB?
Quite aligned, similar patterns. I would say that because of our large footprint, we have a lot of different operating models. Obviously, those who have to perform jobs that require them to be in our manufacturing plants, for instance. Those who have more intellectual roles whereby they can stay at home. We have the most typical program that is out there and covering about 20,000 employees today is 2 days at work, 3 days at home, or vice versa. We're also having pilots around the world, and actually more than pilots now, shortened work weeks. They do more hours in 4 days and have an extra day off and a prolonged weekend. And we have also what we call the Blue Seeds, completely remote teams, no longer actually coming to office. Now, what we've come to definitely observe is that cultural anchor in a company creates loyalty. And as you may know, for us, we build careers over a whole lifespan. People grow within the company and they become the executive leadership of our company. We don't go and recruit that often outside across a lifespan. We really recruit after school and they join us and stay with us. So we still want that growth so that we create the best leaders of tomorrow. And for that to happen, you pointed it out, connections matter. And we think that as we observe the post-pandemic, you have people that believe they don't want to connect anymore until they actually test it, until they warm up to the feeling of being connected again, and then they ask for more. So we are at this turning point right now. We've increased, for instance, our training investment for next year because we feel very much that there's eagerness for people to be in the same room again. There is fatigue of screen interactions. There is a request to meet and celebrate together. These are cultural bursts that any company has to invest in. And Lionel was pointing out about their yearly get-together. These are key moments that you have to create in your corporation or in your little company that connects people together.
You know, it's interesting as we've had this discussion with many of our clients who have received feedback, oh no, we want to stay remote, we want to stay remote. And then when they dig a little deeper, they understand some of the barriers are maybe not quite as obvious. For example, if you have a very young company, which we do, average age of our employees, I think is 27, parking is an issue. If I'm having to spend a significant amount of my take-home salary to get downtown, to pay for gas, to pay for parking, that's a barrier. It's not that I don't want to be together, it's that I have other concerns. We had one client who said the biggest barrier they had is that people said, I don't want to go back to wearing a suit. I want to wear jeans. They said, we can make that happen. That's not a problem. That's the barrier. So it does require a bit more conversation to say what's really needed, what's really desired. You know, to your point, when people get together, they want to be together more. And what are those barriers and how do we remove those barriers, maybe in a different way than we would have before the pandemic? So we're coming close to time. Another question we got, which is a little more, I think, probably pragmatic, is how are you doing most of your recruiting right now? Or is it mostly, has it changed? Is it direct referrals? Are you using more applications? Has technology been helpful? What are those avenues for recruiting? How have they changed? What are you finding that's useful? What recommendations or suggestions could you have for people on the call?
Lionel,
go first.
Okay, yes, I'll do a quick answer and say, sorry, really, I know it's not reply, but I really need to go to the next meeting. So, and I cannot be late on that one. But we receive a lot of unsolicited demands, and we make sure that we answer to all of them. But for key position, we use search firms, and that what works. I mean, it's a war for talent, so people are fighting for talents, and And what I'm doing now, talking about our recruitment, it's part of that policy. So we are looking for talents, and I don't think there is one way. We need to have, thousands of, it's a world we are reinventing that world as we speak. So this is part of what we all do now.
Okay, thank you. And no, you have to go. So thank you, Lionel. Really appreciate your insight and perspectives, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
So, Arangni, you want to finish up that? Is there anything that's been particularly effective with SLB that you've found, or any advice you have for those listening?
I think I'll echo Lionel's feedback. I mean, unsolicited applications is a big stream of applications for us. But I'd say there's a shift, because I'd say the new market and the war for talent requires us now to be also proactive in the targets we want to welcome in the company. So we do use search firms. We do use also the search engines such as LinkedIn, extremely powerful as well to find candidates, and mainly the mid-career professionals. We have more and more of those mid-career professionals that we're hiring today, specifically also in support functions. That is quite, I'd say, growing trend in SLB today. So we hire in all the functions today, and mostly mid-careers, and we look for specific talents in local markets available to join us. So I'd say a huge mix. Career fairs are really still important, whether they're remote career fairs within the universities or big industry fairs. We are also present, but obviously a large company and a large footprint. I would say invest in your talent acquisition resources, because they are important in the current market trends. And despite some signals of recession here and there, I don't believe there's any specific concern to have on that front. We should actually actively invest and be prepared to be good at talent acquisition, whether small company or bigger ones.
Absolutely. And another key point too is there are different avenues that can help you find the best talent. But when you have employee referrals, it's not just an avenue to find talent, it's also an avenue to check your culture, because people will not recommend others come work for a company if they're not happy there as well. So it can be a helpful, it can give you two different pieces of information, which can be very useful. So that's it. That brings us to time, actually a little bit late. So for those on the call, thank you so much for participating and staying with us. We hope this was helpful and useful. I know it certainly was for me. And appreciate everything that the Chamber of Commerce has done, and appreciate your thoughts. So Charlotte, do you have any closing comments?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you, Zoe, Orani, and Lionel for this morning. We were very happy to do that webinar, and you will be able to see the replay on our website. It will be done today or tomorrow. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.